Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans, for Ohio State fans. For the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, November 2nd, 2025, and thank you for joining me while I talk to myself about number one Ohio State's impressive 38-14 home victory over Penn State yesterday afternoon in the Horseshoe. I'm also going to spend a few minutes looking ahead to Ohio State's next opponent, the Purdue Boilermakers. The Buckeyes will travel to West Lafayette next Saturday for a 1 p.m. Eastern kick with the Boilermakers. But first, let's talk about what was the Buckeyes' ninth straight win over Penn State yesterday afternoon. Now, in the early stages of this game, things went mostly to plan for the Buckeyes. They jumped out to a 10-0 lead with 11 play scoring drives on their first two possessions. The first went for 89 yards in the first quarter and was capped by a 14-yard touchdown pass from Julian Sain to Jeremiah Smith. The second went for 71 yards, stalling at the Penn State 4-yard line, and was capped by a Jaden Fielding 22-yard field goal. Give Penn State credit, though. Their offense, led by redshirt freshman Ethan Grunkemeyer, would respond. Grunkemeyer led Penn State on a 15-play, 75-yard touchdown drive in the second quarter that ate up nearly 8 minutes of the game clock. Nicholas Singleton capped that drive with a 3-yard touchdown run to cut the Ohio State lead to 10-7. Then with 2 minutes to play in the second quarter and the Buckeyes leading 17-7, things would get interesting, as I thought they might. Penn State defensive end Denai Dennis Sutton stripped the ball from C.J. Donaldson at the Ohio State 22-yard line. Chaz Coleman scooped it up and returned the ball to the Ohio State 13-yard line. 4 plays later, Katron Allen would score on a 1-yard touchdown run, cutting the Ohio State lead to 17-14 heading into the half. And Penn State was right back in this game, or so it appeared. Now, I said leading up to this game that I expected Penn State, which was probably the second most talented team Ohio State will face during the regular season, to put up a good fight. So while I was annoyed this was a 3-point game at the half, I certainly wasn't surprised, even though that rare fumble by C.J. Donaldson was the only drive the Buckeye offense didn't score on in the first half. I'm not counting Julian Sain's kneel down to run out the clock on the last play of the half. The Penn State defense hadn't really come close to stopping the Buckeyes before that. So while the scoreboard at the half would suggest a game that was nip and tuck between two evenly matched teams, the reality was that Penn State had only one sustained drive the entire first half. They were gifted the ball at the Ohio State 13-yard line on their second scoring drive, and of course they punted on their 3 other possessions of the first half. Meanwhile, Ohio State had scoring drives of 89 yards, 71 yards, and 75 yards, and they had outgained Penn State by nearly 100 yards heading into halftime. Ryan Day said in the postgame, quote, "We came in at halftime, we were up by 3, but you would have thought we were down by 21. But I thought we responded well, and that's the thing. When you come out in the second half, you have to learn from the first half, but you can't dwell on it," end quote. And I think Day perfectly described there the mindset of a championship team. The Buckeyes etch-a-sketched the disappointing end of the first half and came storming out of the locker room to start the third quarter. On the second play from scrimmage, Julian Sain hit Carnell Tate on a 57-yard bomb to set up C.J. Donaldson 1-yard touchdown run that pushed the Buckeye lead out to 24-14. On the ensuing Penn State possession, Kenyatta Jackson would sack Ethan Grunkemeyer on third down for an 8-yard loss, forcing another Penn State punt. 2 plays later, Julian Sain would complete another 57-yard moonshot, this time to Jeremiah Smith, which set up his 1-yard touchdown pass to Bennett Christian to put the Buckeyes up 31-14 with 3:21 to play in the third quarter. And that was pretty much your ball game. Sain would lead the Buckeyes on one more scoring drive that featured a 51-yard run by Bo Jackson. It was Ohio State's third scrimmage play of 50-plus yards in this game against Jim Knowles' defense. On the next play, Jeremiah Smith made a spectacular one-handed grab of a Sain pass that was tipped at the line of scrimmage for an 11-yard touchdown with 9:43 to play in the game. And on the day after Halloween, Smith's second touchdown grab of the afternoon would be the final nail in Penn State's coffin. So as I always do on Sundays, I'm going to tick down a short list of observations from this game. Then I'll finish with a short preview of Ohio State's visit to West Lafayette next Saturday. Folks, barring unforeseen circumstances, Julian Sayin is headed to New York as a Heisman finalist. He would be the fourth first-year starting quarterback to do it under Ryan Day, 20 of 23 for 316 yards passing and 4 more passing touchdowns in this game for Sayin. He had more touchdown passes than incompletions against a Penn State defense that came into this game 5th nationally in passing defense. And Sayin had completions of 45 yards and 57 yards to Carnell Tate and 57 yards to Jeremiah Smith. His 80.7 completion percentage leads the country by a very wide margin. That's more than 7 percentage points better than the next quarterback, Damon Williams Jr. of Washington. I thought Penn State put some good pressure on Julian Sayin in this game, especially in the first half. Penn State finished with 15 pressures of Sayin in this game. I didn't think it was a great day in pass protection by the Ohio State offensive line either. According to PFF, Austin Sarabeld and Tegra Shabola both finished with pass blocking grades in the 40s. And Carson Hinsman finished with a dreadful pass blocking grade of 20.1. He allowed a team-high 4 pressures. It was far and away Hinsman's worst pass blocking performance of the season, but none of that fazed Sayin at all. He was excellent navigating the pocket in this game. The play a lot of folks are talking about today came on Ohio State's second touchdown drive of the game. On 3rd and 5 from the Ohio State 30-yard line, Sayin sidestepped 2 Penn State pass rushers, including Denai Dennis Sutton, escaped the pocket, and then ran 9 yards to pick up the first down. And he didn't slide on the play. He lowered his shoulder into a Penn State defensive back to keep that drive alive. 3 plays later, Sayin would hit Carnell Tate for a 45-yard touchdown pass. Folks, that's the kind of playmaking that you would expect from a Heisman caliber quarterback. It was an excellent sequence there by Julian Sayin. According to ESPN, Sayin now has 4 games this season completing 85% of his passes for more than 300 yards and at least 3 passing touchdowns. No other quarterback in the country has more than 1 such game. And according to BetESPN, Sayin now has the best odds at plus 175 to win the Heisman Trophy. Now, Sayin might have some company in New York in receiver Jeremiah Smith. 6 catches for 123 yards and 2 touchdown catches for Smith yesterday. That included a spectacular one-handed touchdown grab on a ball that had been tipped at the line of scrimmage. I mentioned that earlier. Through 8 games, Smith has 55 catches for 725 yards and 10 total touchdowns. 9 of those are receiving. But Smith has some work to do to secure his spot in New York. He's only tied for 11th nationally in receptions. He's 12th nationally in receiving yards, and he's tied for 5th nationally in touchdown receptions. But if you look at Ohio State's next 3 opponents, at Purdue and home against UCLA and Rutgers, Smith should have the opportunity to put up some big numbers over these next 3 weeks. So there's a chance he could put up just enough of the necessary stats to get that invite to New York. That would have to include, of course, a huge game against Michigan in Ann Arbor, and more than likely a big performance in the Big Ten title game, likely against Indiana, if, of course, the Buckeyes can get there. But I think what might be Smith's biggest obstacle getting to New York is his own teammate, Carnell Tate. 5 receptions for 124 yards and 1 touchdown catch for Tate yesterday. Through 8 games, Tate has 39 receptions for 711 yards and 7 touchdown catches. Now, Tate isn't a realistic Heisman candidate, but I think the huge numbers that he's putting up could draw some attention away from Smith as a Heisman candidate. Now, I think there's a much more interesting conversation to have about Smith and Tate for the Biletnikoff Award, because as great as they both are, the Heisman, look, it's a quarterback award, and there are too many quarterbacks having great seasons this year. Julian Sayin, of course, Ty Simpson at Alabama, Fernando Mendoza at Indiana. But I think it's a real competition between these 2 teammates, Smith and Tate, for the award that goes to the country's best receiver. Now, Smith has been more of a workhorse this season with 55 receptions. That's 16 more than Tate, but Tate has been the more explosive receiver. His 18.5 yards per reception is 5 yards better than Smith. Whatever the case, whatever happens with these 2 receivers and whether or not they get the recognition and awards and first-team All-America spots and that sort of thing, Smith and Tate are the best receiver duo in the country. And with Julian Sayin, Ohio State has the country's best passing game, period, full stop. Yesterday, those 3 completely shredded a Penn State defense that has a lot of dudes that are going to be playing on Sundays and was very good at defending the pass. And Penn State came into this game 5th nationally in defending the pass. While we're on the subject of awards, I think we can start having a serious conversation about Arvell Reese for Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. Reese is Ohio State's leading tackler with 54. He's fourth in the Big Ten in sacks with 6.5. He's tied for fourth in the Big Ten in tackles for loss with 9. And similar to what I just said about Jeremiah Smith, Reese is going to have the opportunity over these next 3 weeks to build on those numbers against the likes of Purdue, UCLA, and Rutgers. And of course, he'll have marquee matchups against Michigan and potentially Indiana in the Big Ten title game to really showcase his abilities. Yesterday, Reese had a game-high 12 tackles, which included 2.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack. Reese finished as Ohio State's second highest graded defender with an overall grade of 81.1, and he finished with the defense's highest grade for tackling of 84. Reese was at the center of another impressive performance by the Buckeye defense. The Silver Bullets held Penn State to 200 total yards of offense at 3.3 yards per play. They finished with 4 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, and 1 turnover. Matt Patricia uses Reese all over the field. Yesterday, Reese played 24 snaps on the edge and 36 snaps in the box as a linebacker. Folks, Reese is a one of one. There is no other defender like him in the Big Ten. If he can stay healthy the rest of the way, I think he is your runaway Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. I want to talk about 2 Ohio State defensive linemen who got off to slow starts this season, largely because of injuries, but who now appear to be healthy and are starting to hit their strides. I've been banging the drum for defensive tackle Edric Houston all season. Now, it's taken him the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season to recover from an injury that he suffered in training camp, but he's starting to round into form now. According to PFF, Houston finished as Ohio State's highest graded defender yesterday with an overall grade of 92.5. He also finished with the defense's highest grade for pass rush of 91.6. In 20 snaps, Houston finished with 3 tackles, which included the first sack of his career on Ethan Grunkmeyer. Houston also forced a fumble on that play, which Penn State recovered. The other defensive lineman is defensive end Kenyatta Jackson. Like Houston, Jackson was slowed by a couple of injuries early in the season, but he's now starting to round into form over these, last couple of games. Jackson finished with a team-high 7 pressures yesterday. He had 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss. Through 8 games, Jackson is now second on the team in pressures behind Caden Curry with 26. Folks, as great as the Ohio State defense has been this season, Edric Houston and Kenyatta Jackson, when healthy and playing at their potential, can make that unit even better, and that has to be a scary prospect for the rest of the country. I think you have to look past Penn State's record to really, truly appreciate how well the Buckeyes played in this game. Penn State is still loaded with NFL talent. They have a top 20 defense, a very good offensive line, and a pair of excellent running backs. And for all their struggles this season, Penn State was still very competitive in their 4 previous losses. They lost those games by a combined 13 points. It's very rare that Penn State loses as convincingly as they did yesterday, and it was their largest margin of defeat since a 41-17 loss to Michigan in 2022. So weighing all of that, I think you can argue that yesterday might have been Ohio State's most impressive win of the season so far. So the very first college football rankings come out this Tuesday. Ohio State, I think, will have a very strong case to be number 1 in those rankings. Indiana will as well. The Hoosiers were very impressive again yesterday in a 55-10 win over Maryland. But the Buckeyes have been the number 1 team in the AP and coaches polls for 2 months now, by a very wide margin, I'll add. They are number 1 in total defense, defensive yards per play, and in stop rate. Their quarterback leads the country in completion percentage. The Buckeyes have been winning in convincing fashion every single Saturday. They are 7-0-1 against the spread. I heard Ari Wasserman say this week that in Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Arvell Reese, and Caleb Downs, Ohio State might have the 5 best players in all of college football. Look, I think it's going to be a good debate about Ohio State and Indiana within the playoff committee this week, but I expect Ohio State to be number 1 in the very first playoff rankings on Tuesday. Okay, let's turn our attention to next Saturday. The Buckeyes will travel to West Lafayette to play probably the worst team in the Big Ten and one of the worst teams in the FBS, the Purdue Boilermakers. This game is an odd 1 p.m. Eastern kick on the Big Ten Network. According to FanDuel, the early line is Ohio State minus 28.5. The over-under is 48.5. This will be the 61st meeting between these schools on the gridiron. The Buckeyes lead the all-time series 43-15 with 2 ties. That includes a 45-0 win in Columbus last season. Purdue's last win in this series was a 49-20 shocker over the number 2 ranked Buckeyes in West Lafayette back in 2018. That was Urban Meyer's last season with the program. Purdue is rebuilding under new head coach Barry Odom, who came over from UNLV, where he held the same post the last 2 seasons. The Boilermakers got off to a promising start with wins over Ball State and Southern Illinois, and they have been much more competitive this season than last. But they've lost their last 7 games, including a 21-16 loss to Michigan in Ann Arbor yesterday. By the way, that game was much closer than I had expected. Now, it isn't translating into wins yet, but statistically, the Purdue offense is showing signs of improvement compared to last season. They come into this game 75th nationally in total offense and tied for 71st in offensive yards per play. They were in the 100s in both of those statistics last season. They're 66th in passing offense, which is another area where they're significantly improved. They finished 113th in passing offense last season. Finally, Purdue is tied for 86th in rushing offense and 107th in scoring offense. The Purdue offense is led by redshirt sophomore quarterback Ryan Brown. Brown comes into this game completing 61% of his passes at 6.8 yards per attempt. He's thrown for just over 1,800 yards, 9 touchdown passes, and 7 picks. He's been sacked 14 times. Brown is a good athlete who can do some things in the run game as well. He has 4 rushing touchdowns this season. A few weeks ago against Minnesota, Brown ran it 8 times for 61 yards, so the Buckeye defense is going to have to be mindful of what Brown can do as a runner in this game. Another player to watch on this Boilermaker offense, if he's able to play, is senior running back Devin Mockabee. Mockabee did not play against Michigan last night due to an ankle injury, and his status for next Saturday is in doubt. But Mockabee has had some success against the Buckeyes in his career. In last year's game, he finished with 73 yards rushing on 13 carries, and against the Buckeyes in 2023, he ran it 18 times for 110 yards. Mockabee has been Purdue's leading rusher in each of the last 2 seasons, and he is their leading rusher again so far this season. Now, if Mockabee can't go, senior Malachi Thomas, the Virginia Tech transfer, will start in his place. Thomas has been pretty good for Purdue so far this season. He's averaging just over 5 yards per carry. Finally, keep your eye on transfer receiver Michael Jackson III. Jackson spent 3 seasons at USC and 1 at Georgia before transferring to Purdue. He leads the Boilermakers in receptions with 50 and receiving yards with 456. On defense, Purdue hasn't seen the same level of improvement as the offense, though I thought they played pretty well against Michigan last night, holding the Wolverines to just 21 points in the Big House. Purdue comes into this game 96th nationally in total defense and tied for 110th in defensive yards per play. They're 87th in scoring defense, 91st against the pass, and 92nd against the run. Michigan ran for 253 yards at 6.5 yards per carry last night against the Boilermakers, and that was without Justice Haynes. Keep your eye on edge C.J. Nunley, the Akron transfer. Nunley leads the Boilermakers in pressures with 21 and sacks with 5. Safety Miles Slusher, who spent 3 seasons at Arkansas and 1 at Colorado before transferring to Purdue, is another player to watch in this game. According to PFF, Slusher is their second highest graded player among Purdue's defensive starters with an overall grade of 73.5. Finally, transfer linebacker Manny Powell, who followed Barry Odom to West Lafayette from UNLV, is Purdue's co-leader in tackles. He's also tied for second on the team in sacks with 3. There was a time when Ross-Ade Stadium was a haunted house for the Buckeyes. For nearly 2 decades, Ohio State struggled to win in that stadium. Between 2000 and 2018, the Buckeyes were 3-5 against the Boilermakers in Ross-Ade Stadium. And Purdue used to be a program that perennially could hang with the Buckeyes, even in a losing effort. Under former head coach Joe Tiller, between 2000 and 2004, Ohio State and Purdue split 4 games that were all decided by 1 score. That included Ohio State's 10-6 victory in Ross-Ade on their way to the 2002 national title. The Buckeyes won that game on the legendary Craig Krenzel to Michael Jenkins' Holy Buckeye 4th down touchdown pass in the final minutes. But we are a long way from that era of Boilermaker football, and I'm sorry to say, Joe Tiller and Drew Brees aren't walking through that door, Purdue fans. Now, the Boilermakers have been much more competitive this season under Barry Odom than last under Ryan Walters. In 11 losses last season, Purdue's average margin of defeat was 31 points. So far this season, they're losing by an average of only 14.5 points, so that's progress. But they're still losing a lot. I'm setting my concernometer for this game at a 1. It looks like there's rain in the forecast, so maybe weather and a half-empty stadium with no atmosphere will conspire to slow the Buckeyes down a bit in this game. Otherwise, I think you really have to squint to see this as much of a game. Again, the early line, according to FanDuel, is Ohio State minus 28.5. The over-under is 48.5. In Purdue, we're talking about a defense that ranks in the 90s nationally, both against the pass and the run. The training wheels on Julian Sain came off 2 weeks ago, folks. And the playbook for Sain and the Ohio State offense is wide open. This also figures to be another game for the Ohio State rushing attack to get right. I'd like to see a little more of Isaiah West in this game than we did against Penn State. I think we will. I also think there should be plenty of room to run for Bo Jackson in this game against the Purdue defense. As I said earlier, the Buckeyes are 7-0-1 against the spread this season. I think it's going to be 8-0-1 after this game. I like Ohio State to win it 42-6. Okay, that's going to do it for me. Look for a recap of Ohio State-Purdue as well as a preview of the Buckeyes' next opponent, UCLA, next Sunday afternoon. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks! You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_Stands.